A reading from Srila Prabhupada, Lilamrta Chapter 1, Childhood. We would be sleeping and father would be doing arati. Ding, ding, ding. We would hear the bell and wake up and see him bowing down before Krishna, Srila Prabhupada. It was Janmashtami, the annual celebration of the advent of Lord Krishna, some 5,000 years before. Residents of Calcutta, mostly Bengalis and other Indians, but also many Muslims and even British, were observing the festive day, moving here and there through the city's streets to visit the temple of Lord Krishna. Devout Vaishnavas, fasting until midnight, chanted Hare Krishna and heard about the birth and activities of Lord Krishna from Srimad Bhagavatam. They continued fasting, chanting and worshipping throughout the night. The next day, September 1st, 1896, in a little house in the Toliganj suburb of Calcutta, a male child was born. Since he was born on Nanda Utsava, the day Krishna's father, Nanda Maharaj, had observed a festival in honor of Krishna's birth, the boy's uncle called him Nandulal, but his father Gaur Mohan De and his mother Rajani named him Abhayacharan, one who is fearless. Having taken shelter at Lord Krishna's lotus feet in accordance with Bengali tradition, the mother had gone to the home of her parents for the delivery, and so it was that on the bank of the Adi Ganga, a few miles from his father's home, in a small two-room mud-walled house with a tiled roof underneath a jackfruit tree, Abhayacharan was born. A few days later, Abhay returned with his parents to their home at 151 Harrison Road. An astrologer did a horoscope for the child and the family was made jubilant by the auspicious reading. The astrologer made a specific prediction. When this child reached the age of 70, he will cross the ocean, become a great exponent of religion and open 108 temples. Abhayacharan De was born in into an India dominated by Victorian imperialism. Calcutta was the capital of India, the seat of the Viceroy, the Earl and Elgin of Kinsarin, and the second city of the British Empire. Europeans and Indians lived separately. Although in business and education they intermingled, the British lived mostly in central Calcutta amidst their own theatres, racetracks, cricket fields and fine European buildings. The Indians lived more in North Calcutta. Here the men dressed in dhotis and the women in saris, and while remaining loyal to the British Crown, followed their traditional religion and culture. Abhay's home at 151 Road was in the Indian section of North Calcutta. Abhay's father, Gaur Mohan De, was a cloth merchant of moderate income and belonged to the aristocratic Suvarna Vanik merchant community. He was related, however, to the wealthy Mulik family, which for hundreds of years had traded in gold and salt with the British. Originally, the Muliks had been members of the De family, a Gotra lineage that traces back to the ancient sage Gautama. But during the Mughal period of pre-British India, a Muslim ruler had conferred the title Mulik, Lord, on a wealthy, influential branch of the Des. Then, several generations later, a daughter of the Des had married into the Mulik family, and the two families had remained close ever since. An entire block of properties on either side of Harrison Road belonged to Loknath Mulik, and Gaur Mohan and his family lived in a few rooms of a 3-story building within the Mulik properties. Across the street from the Des residence was a Radha Govinda temple, where for the past 150 years the Muliks had maintained worship of the deity of Radha and Krishna. Various shops on the Mulik properties provided income for the deity and for the priests conducting the worship. Every morning before breakfast, the Mulik family members would visit the temple to see the deity of Radha Govinda. They would offer cooked rice, kachoris, and vegetables on a large platter and would then distribute the prasadam to the deities, morning visitors from the neighborhood. Among the daily visitors was Abhayacharan, accompanying his mother, father, or servant. Srila Prabhupada. I used to ride on the same perambulator with Siddheswar Mulik. He used to call me Moti, Pearl, and his nickname was Subhidi. And the seven pushed us together. If one day this friend did not see me, he would become mad. He would not go in the perambulator without me. We would not separate even for a moment. As the seven pushed the baby carriage into the wide expanse of Harrison Road, timing his crossing between the bicycles and horse-drawn hackneys, the two children in the pram gazed up at the fair sky and tall trees crossed the road, sounds and sides of the hackneys, with their large wheels spinning over the road. Caught the fascinated attention of the two children, the seven steered the carriage towards the arched gateway within the red sandstone wall bordering the Radha Govinda Mandira, and as Abhay and his friend rode underneath the ornate metal arch and into the courtyard, they saw high above them two stone lions, the heralds and protectors of the temple compound, their right paws extended. In the courtyard was a circular drive, and on the oval lawn were lampposts with gaslights and a statue of a young woman in robes. Sharply chirping sparrows flitted in the shrubs and trees or hopped across the grass, pausing to peck the ground, while choruses of pigeons cooed, sometimes abruptly flapping their wings overhead, sailing off to another perch of descending to the courtyard. Voices chattered as Bengalis moved to and fro, dressed in simple cotton saris and white dhotis. Someone paused by the cage to amuse the golden-skinned boys with their shining dark eyes. But mostly people were passed by quickly going into the temple. The heavy double doors leading into the inner courtyard were opened, and the servant eased the carriage wheels down a foot-deep step and proceeded through the foyer, then down another step and into the bright sunlight in the main courtyard. There they faced a stone statue of Garuda. Perched on a 4-foot column, this carrier of Vishnu, Garuda, half man and half bird, kneeled on one knee, his hands folded prayerfully, his eagle's beak strong and his wings poised behind him. The carriage moved ahead, past two servants, sweeping and washing the stone courtyard. It was just a few paces across the courtyard to the temple. The temple area itself, open like a pavilion, was a raised platform with a stone roof supported by stout pillars 15 feet tall. At the left end of the temple pavilion stood a crowd of worshippers viewing the deities on the altar. The servant pushed the carriage closer, lifted the two boys out, and then, holding their hands, escorted them reverentially before the deities. Srila Prabhupada, I can remember standing at the doorway of Radha Govinda temple saying prayers to Radha Govinda Murti. I would watch for hours together. The deity was so beautiful with his slanted eyes. Radha and Govinda, freshly bathed and dressed, now stood on their silver throne amidst vases of fragrant flowers. Govinda was about 18 inches high, and Radharani, standing to his left, was slightly smaller. Both were golden. Radha and Govinda both stood in the same gracefully curved dancing pose, right leg bent at the knee and right foot placed in front of the left. Radharani, dressed in a lustrous silk sari, held up her reddish right palm in benediction, and Krishna in his silk jacket and dhoti played on a golden flute. At Govinda's lotus feet were green tulasi leaves with pulp of sandalwood hanging around their lordships' necks, and reaching down almost to their lotus feet were several garlands of fragrant night blooming jasmine, delicate trumpet-like blossoms resting lightly on Radha and Govinda's divine forms. Their necklaces of gold, pearls, and diamonds shimmered. Radharani's bracelets were of gold, and both she and Krishna wore gold-embroidered silk chadars about their shoulders. The flowers in their hands and hair were small and delicate, and the silver crowns on their heads were bedecked with jewels. Radha and Krishna were slightly smiling, beautifully dressed, dancing on their silver throne beneath a silver canopy, and surrounded by flowers. To Abhay, they appeared most attractive. Life outside on Harrison Road and beyond was forgotten. In the courtyard, the birds went on chirping and visitors came and went up. But Abhay stood silently absorbed in seeing the beautiful forms of Krishna and Radharani, the Supreme Lord and his eternal consort. Then the kirtan began, devotees chanting and playing on drums and karatalas. Abhay and his friend kept watching as the pujaris offered incense, its curling smoking hanging in the air. Then a flaming lamp, a conch shell, a handkerchief, flowers, a whisk, and a peacock fan. Finally, the pujari blew the conch shell loudly and the arati ceremony was over. When Abhay was 1.5 years old, he fell ill with typhoid. The family physician, Dr. Bose, prescribed chicken broth. No, Gaur Mohan protested, I cannot allow it. Yes, otherwise he will die. But we are not meat eaters, Gaur Mohan pleaded. We cannot prepare chicken in our kitchen. Don't mind, Dr. Bose said. I shall prepare it at my house and bring it in a jar, and you simply. Gaur Mohan assented. If it is necessary for my son to live. So the doctor came with his chicken broth and offered it to Abhay, who immediately began to vomit. All right, the doctor admitted. Never mind, this is no good. Gaur Mohan then threw the chicken broth away, and Abhay gradually recovered from the typhoid without having to eat meat. On the roof of Abhay's maternal grandmother's house was a little garden with flowers, greenery and trees. Along with the other grandchildren, 2-year-old Abhay took pleasure in watering the plants with a sprinkling can. But his particular tendency was to sit alone amongst the plants. He would find a nice bush and make a sitting place. One day, when Abhay was 3, he narrowly escaped a fatal burning. He was playing with matches in front of his house. When he caught his cloth on fire, suddenly a man appeared and put the fire out. Abhay was saved, although he retained a small scar on his leg. In 1900, when Abhay was 4, a vehement plague hit Calcutta. Dozens of people died every day, and thousands evacuated the city. When there seemed no way to check the plague, an old Babaji organized Hare Krishna Sankirtan all over Calcutta. Regardless of religion, Hindu, Muslim, Christian and Parsi all joined, and a large party of chanters traveled from street to street, door to door, chanting the names of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The group arrived at Gaur Mohan's house at 151 Harrison Road, and Gaur Mohan eagerly received them. Although Abhay was a little child, his head reaching only up to the knees of the chanters, he also joined in the dancing. Shortly after this, the plague subsided. Gaur Mohan was a pure Vaishnava, and he raised his son to be Krishna conscious. Since his own parents had also been Vaishnavas, Gaur Mohan had never touched meat, fish, eggs, tea or coffee. His complexion was fair and his disposition reserved. At night he would lock up his cloth shop, set a bowl of rice in the middle of the floor to satisfy the rats so that they would not chew the cloth in their hunger, and return home. There he would read from Chaitanya Charitamrita and Srimad Bhagavatam, the main scriptures of Bengali Vaishnavas, chant on his japa beads and worship the deity of Lord Krishna. He was gentle and affectionate and would never punish Abhay. Even when obliged to correct him, Gaur Mohan would first apologize. You are my son, so now I must correct you. It is my duty. Even Chaitanya, Mahaprabhu's father, would chastise him, so don't mind. Srila Prabhupada. My father's income was no more than 250 rupees, but there was no question of need. In the mango season, when we were children, we would run through the house playing, and we would grab mangoes as we were running through, and all through the day we would eat mangoes. We wouldn't have to think, can I have a mango? My father always provided food. Mangoes were 1 rupee a dozen. Life was simple, but there was always plenty. We were middle class, but receiving 4 or 5 guests daily. My father gave 4 daughters in marriage, and there was no difficulty for him. Maybe it was not a very luxurious life, but there was no scarcity of food or shelter of cloth. Daily he purchased 2.5 kilograms of milk. He did not like to purchase retail, but would purchase a year's supply of coal by the cartload. We were happy, not that because we did not purchase a motor car we were unhappy. My father used to say, God has 10 hands. If he wants to take away from you with 2 hands, how much can you protect? And when he wants to give to you with 10 hands, then with your 2 hands, how much can you take? My father would rise a little late, around 7 or 8. Then after taking bath, he would go purchasing. Then from 10 o'clock to 1 in the afternoon, he was engaged in puja. Then he would take his lunch and go to business. And in the business shop, he would take a little rest for 1 hour. He would come home from business at 10 o'clock at night, and then again he would do puja. Actually, his real business was puja. For livelihood, he did some business. For livelihood, he did some business, but puja was his main business. He would be sleeping and father would be doing arati, ding, ding, ding. We would hear the bell and wake up and see him bowing down before Krishna. Gaur Mohan wanted Vaishnava goals for his son. He wanted Abhay to become a servant of Radharani, to become a preacher of the Bhagavatam, and to learn the devotional art of playing mridanga. He regularly received sadhus in his home, and he would always ask them, please bless my son so that Srimati Radharani may be pleased with him and grant him her blessings. Enjoying each other's company, father and son used to walk as far as 10 miles, saving the 5 paisa tram fare. On the beach they used to see a yogi who for years had sat in one spot without moving. One day the yogi's son was sitting there and people had gathered around. The son was taking over his father's sitting place. Gaur Mohan gave the yogis a donation and asked their blessings for his son. When Abhay's mother said she wanted him to become a British lawyer, when he grew up, which meant he would have to go to London to study, one of the Mulik uncles thought it was a good idea, but Gaur Mohan would not hear of it. If Abhay went to England, he would be influenced by European dress and manners. He will learn drinking and women hunting. Gaur Mohan objected, I do not want his money. From the beginning of Abhay's life, Gaur Mohan had introduced his plan. He had hired a professional mridanga player to teach Abhay the standard rhythms for accompanying kirtan. Rajani had been skeptical. What is the purpose of teaching a such child to play the mardanga? It is not important. But Gaur Mohan had his dream of a son who would grow up singing bhajans, playing mardanga, and speaking on Srimad Bhagavatam. When Abhay set to play the mridanga, even with his left and right arms extended as far as he could, his small hands would barely reach the drum heads at the opposite ends of the drum. With his right wrist, he would flick his hand just as his teacher instructed, and his fingers would make a high-pitched sound, ti, ni, to. And then he would strike the left drum head with his open left hand, boom, boom. With practice and age, he was gradually learning the basic rhythms, and Gaur Mohan looked on with pleasure. Abhay was an acknowledged pet child of both his parents. In addition to his childhood names Moti, Nandulal, Nandu or Kocha, his grandmother called him Kachori Mukhi, because of his fondness for kachoris, spicy vegetable stuffed fried pastries popular in Bengal. Both his grandmother and mother would give him kachoris, which he kept in the many pockets of his little vest. He liked to watch the vendors cooking on the busy roadside and accept kachoris from them and from the neighbors until all the inside and outside pockets of his vest were filled.